Downtown Cincinnati's newest independent hotel just debuted, and she's a beaut. Also, what happened to Cincinnati's once booming nightlife scene? And should, or even could, Cincinnati's stadium tax be used to avoid a big tax levy this fall? And it's the end of an era for hat lovers in Cincinnati. This is Above the Fold.
Whether you're rediscovering your hometown or planning your next getaway, Cincy offers unforgettable experiences at a price that's hard to beat. Catch a game, explore world-class museums, enjoy miles of parks and trails, experience live music, or dive into one of the Midwest's most exciting food scenes. Learn more or plan your trip at visitcincy.com.
Welcome to Above the Fold, a podcast by the Cincinnati Business Courier presented by Cincinnati Regional Tourism, where we bring you the week's top stories and interviews with newsmakers that take you behind the people and personalities in the news. I'm your host, Andy Brownfield, joined by co-host and Courier Editor-in-Chief, Tom Demeropoulos. Welcome, Tom.
Hi, Andy.
So before we jump into the news this week, this may be the last you hear from me for a while. My wife, Hannah, is due with our first, a girl, any day now. And if you don't hear from me in a while, that's why. I didn't fall off the face of the earth, nor was I fired. At least, I hope not. Tom can let you all know that if that's the case, since I won't be recording the podcast anymore.
Yes, I will keep everyone informed of your whereabouts.
Yeah, either way, I'm going to be on dad duty. But in the meantime, Above the Fold is bringing you the biggest stories of the week and interviews with some of the most important local newsmakers. This week, we have Nick Lingenfelter, Chief Development Officer of PLK Communities, the company behind projects like Factory 52 in Norwood and the upcoming redevelopment of Hyde Park Square. So on to the news of the week. Tom, when's the last time you went to a bar? Just a bar, not a restaurant to have a craft cocktail or a beer, but a bar.
Do breweries count? I would argue no, right? Breweries don't count as bars.
I guess they kind of serve the same function in what we're about to talk about.
Yeah, so I would say about a year ago.
And where'd you go?
So that would be Mad Tree in Blue Ash, the new Mad Tree.
Okay. Now, was this for work?
No, this was a
because I know we have a
night out.
number of events there. For me, it was a little over a year ago. It was, because last winter, Hannah was pregnant, so we weren't going out to bars. But the winter before that, we went to the Blind Lemon in Mount Adams, and it's got a great atmosphere for getting a cozy cocktail while it's, not too cold, but cold outside. But it seems like more and more these days, that kind of environment where it's just a bar is not really popping up as much.
Yeah, it's, part of this I was thinking, Andy, is it because of our age? We're roughly the same age. So we're at that point in life where, going out to bars is not as big of a part of our social lives. But I don't think that's the case.
No, and before we jump into the why, I think we should talk a little bit about why it matters. Because you're right. I mean, I'm pushing 40. You are newly
I crossed
40.
the line.
Yeah. And we are not, millennials are not going out to, when I was in my younger years, my late 20s or mid 20s, that was what we did on weekends. We'd go bar hopping. We'd take an Uber down to Over the Rhine and hit maybe 2-3 places, start at 10 and stay out until they closed at 2:30. So, and I think that kind of activity is why these establishments are important to neighborhood business districts. Look at Over the Rhine. Look at Pleasant Ridge. Look at Walnut Hills. These bars, these establishments, they are keeping these business districts activated after the 9-to-5 businesses close, after the restaurants close for their evening dinner shifts. So it keeps people coming to these business districts, and that helps spur development around them.
Absolutely, Andy. And it gives it an additional sense of place. Like we talk about the third place a lot. And oftentimes people are thinking of like a coffee shop or something, but a bar can serve that purpose too. It can be the place where you go out and meet people who become your neighbors and become your friends. And, it helps really spawn that idea of community.
For sure. I mean, when I was newly single and living in Walnut Hills by myself, I became a regular at the brew house. It was across the street from my apartment. I was there just about every night, which probably wasn't healthy, but it helped me meet a lot of people who are still friends to this day. And if you look at Walnut Hills at nighttime, it's bustling. They have several bars. They've got esoteric brewing. They've got several restaurants. Now, if you contrast that to like Mount Washington, where I grew up, their business district has a Kroger, a karate studio, Piano Sensei, not knocking Piano Sensei, a couple tattoo parlors, a tax prep. There's really no reason for anybody to be there after 5 o'clock.
Right.
But, these places used to have bartenders like Molly Wellman, who'd be very extremely successful, attract investors, then open up 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places. 4EG, still probably the undisputed king of Cincinnati nightlife, with more establishments than anyone else. And that kind of bartender to multi-venue owner pipeline just isn't happening anymore. I mean, Haley Roden, our restaurant and entertainment reporter, she talked to a number of operators like Jacob Trevino, who at one point had multiple venues, I think 6 in Cincinnati. Now he's down to 3. He told her that it's getting more expensive to open. His first venue cost him about $120,000 to open. And his most recent one, which is opened in Dublin, Ohio, cost $1 million. And on top of that, startup costs, I mean, there's fees, licensing, insurance, taxes. Julia Petiprin, who opened up Sundry and Vice and then now owns 50/50 Gin Club and Homemakers Bar, she, by all rights, should be one of the future Molly Wellmans of Cincinnati. But she said that it's these costs, they just compound, and you feel like you're opening up a bar to pay people, not necessarily to run a bar.
Andy, that's one of the things that I found in editing and reading Haley's story is this idea that these are not, these are really good operators, not just like they're really good operators. These are like nationally lauded operators who are saying, yeah, even for me, this does not make sense to keep trying to open new locations because it's really expensive and it's a lot harder than it used to be.
And Jacob, I think he had the money quote of all this. He said that the war is against the couch. They're not competing with each other. They're not competing with movie theaters. The war is getting people out of the house and back into restaurants and bars and in the entertainment space. And he's kind of right. I mean, we're probably the wrong demographic to be talking about this. You live on the far west side. I live on the far east side. I'm not leaving Anderson Township to drive 15 to 30 minutes to drop $100 on a bar tab and just as an expensive Uber home, when I can make an old fashioned in my kitchen and then just walk over to my living room, put on an episode of Lost or 2, and just have a night in.
Yeah, Andy, you're right. But it's not just us. It's not just our demographic. If you look at the way people have changed their habits post pandemic, this is a big swing. This is a large change of how people socialize, and it's not out in person as often. Like you're talking about, in one study, almost a 60% increase in people spending more time at home than before the pandemic.
And people are just drinking less too. I know a lot of ink is spilled about how Gen Z is drinking less, but American adults are drinking less. The Gallup recently reported that between 2023 and 2025, the number of Americans who said that they had a drink went from 62% to 54%. And on top of that, with the introduction of THC legalized in Ohio and elsewhere, and THC beverages, people have alternatives. And as of right now, a lot of these bar owners are not stocking THC beverages. I mean, Keel Erdelak, who Haley interviewed, the owner of Binsky's Bar, he said that it's just too hard to control people mixing alcohol and THC at the same time, and his insurance costs would just go through the roof if he decided to serve both. And side note, if anyone hasn't been to Binsky's for a meat raffle on Friday nights, it's a scene. You definitely should go check it out. Keel leads the meat chant, and you can buy raffle tickets and get choice cuts of meat from Wyoming meat markets, and it all goes to support a good cause.
So like steaks, or like what are cuts of
steaks, chorizo sausages, all kinds of stuff. In Wyoming meat market, I've got a friend who just raves about that place.
I'm missing out. So
Tom, when you travel, are you a hotel guy or are you an Airbnb guy?
I have always been a hotel guy. I have never stayed at an Airbnb. Now for vacation, I'll do VRBO or like the local equivalent of that. But I've never stayed in an Airbnb.
See, we're the opposite. Hannah and I typically only exclusively stay in Airbnbs because you can get the whole house, you got the amenities of a house, laundry. But I kind of love staying in hotels. I love just ordering room service straight to the room, pigging out on TV that I would otherwise not normally watch in a million years, and just having everything taken care of for me.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the hotel stay is I can just leave in the morning. I don't have to clean up anything. Just go.
And you don't have to clean after the stay too. I know these Airbnbs charge arm and a leg for cleaning fees, but I've seen one couple on social media that's getting absolutely dragged for just the ridiculous standards that they have for posting videos of the things that their tenants have left at their Airbnb, and they're really innocuous things, neither here nor there. The new Fidelity Hotel, which just opened in the Gwynn Building, Procter & Gamble's former headquarters in downtown Cincinnati, it really is something else. I mean, the building itself is a Beaux Arts building from, I think, from 1913. It has been completely renovated to house 165 guest rooms and 17 suites. And Brian Planout covered the ribbon cutting for that building, and our photographer, Corey Schaffel, got to go inside and shoot some of the rooms. And I think that could sway me away from Airbnbs.
Yeah, Andy, looking at these photos, this is quite the hotel. So even before it was transformed into a hotel, this was probably my favorite building downtown. I took a photo of it when I was up in the 580 building when that was being converted to apartments because it's just such a great looking building on the exterior, and now the interior really matches that external beauty.
It took a little bit to convert. I mean, construction began in September of 2024, and the project, it took 4 attempts to win Ohio Historic Preservation tax credits, but it powered along and it's now open. The ground floor amenities include things like Cora's All-Day Cafe and the Gwynn, a new restaurant that has been opened by Brad Bernstein, the former owner, longtime owner of the beloved Red Feather Kitchen in Oakley, and the one-time owner of Dutch's Pony Cake in Hyde Park.
Yeah, Andy, looking at this hotel, it's really, I think today's traveler is often looking for that high touch, unique experience, and that's what they're going to get at the Fidelity. This is a totally unique hotel. Hopefully, it draws a lot of people into the city to check out not just the hotel, but also the rest of the city.
Yeah, visit Cincy interim CEO Julie Kirkpatrick. She framed the opening within a broader $2 billion investment in visitor-facing tourism infrastructure recently completed or underway, including the First Financial Center, our rehabbed convention center, Elm Street Plaza, and the upcoming Marriott headquarters hotel.
Short story on the Fidelity. So that the building, the Gwynn building, my football coach, my defensive back coach, for those who don't know that I played football in high school.
Which I didn't know until last week.
He was the property manager for that building when it was still an office building. So interesting to see what it's transitioned into.
So this next story, it makes me a little sad to talk about this. So my dad would always tell me, and I know how to pronounce this now thanks to you, that I needed to visit Batsaki's hat shop, a downtown Cincinnati staple to have a hat made by Gus. And unfortunately, I think the time is running out for that.
Yeah, Andy, I don't know about you, but I don't like the way I look wearing any type of hat. So I've never been a hat person. Even when I would wear like a ball cap, I would always think that it's just for whatever reason, it's an odd look on me. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too self-conscious, but probably should have tried a fedora at some point. Maybe I was wearing the wrong hat.
Probably. I mean, I was never a hat guy either until I went on a trip to Utah with my future in-laws, and my father-in-law and I were looking at this cowboy style hat, and I don't know what the price was, but it rang up for something like absurdly expensive, and my father-in-law said, "Oh, I think that was $25," pointing to a price tag, and they sold it to me for $25, and I still got that cowboy style hat. It's my hiking hat. Gus Miller is 93. He emigrated from Greece in 1949 at the age of 17 to work for his uncle, Pete Batsakis. And he's been making hats in Cincinnati ever since. And I mean, this is like the place to go for hats in Cincinnati. His customers include people like Pete Rose, rapper Snoop Dogg, and Luciano Pavarotti.
So I went and visited Gus and Rita when they let us know that the store is going to be closing, and to see the pictures that he has of people and to hear some of the stories that he tells about his customers was pretty incredible. He made a hat for, at the time, presidential candidate George H.W. Bush. And when he ran into the President Bush at some sort of event, not only did he remember Gus by name, where he was from, Gus Miller from Cincinnati, and he asked about the guy who shined his shoes while he was there too, because he said that was the best shoe shine he had ever gotten.
Oh, wow.
So really, really an impactful retailer in downtown Cincinnati.
Yeah, and it's not that Gus doesn't want to make hats anymore. I mean, he's 93. What an incredible thing that you don't have to work until you're 93. You want to work until you're 93. His wife Rita said that he didn't want to close the store, but he just can't continue. I mean, at 93, he's just hat making is a very involved activity. All right, so to change tracks for this next story, we voters are going to be deciding a number of tax issues this fall. I mean, Cincinnati Public Schools is going to put an earnings tax on the ballot, and Hamilton County Department of Family and Children's Services wants to put on a levy to cover a massive spending gap in that department's budget. So Hamilton County commissioners met last week, and they're going to be voting as early as today on sending this property tax increase to voters in November. And Commissioner Alicia Reese asked whether or not the county could use a portion of the stadium sales tax to offset how much the voters are going to have to vote on the property tax.
Yeah, Andy, because we're talking about this is a big ask of payers, because the costs for children's services have risen so much in the past couple of years. County really needs some additional funding, and I know she's looking at that half-cent sales tax as an option. But I don't, reading from Chris Wedrick's report, I don't really see how that could be an option.
Yeah, County Administrator Jeff Aludo said that bond obligations make that impossible until at least 2033. I mean, he said that the Riverfront Sales Tax Fund won't have any meaningful annual cash flow capacity until that year. So unfortunately, it looks like it might not be a viable option. But just to give an idea of the need there is, the cost of placing children in out-of-home care has risen from $48.3 million in 2022 to $93 million in 2025. And the Children's Services Levy currently raises only $82 million annually from Hamilton County property taxpayers. And that's part of $139 million in total department spending.
Yeah, Andy, this clearly is a big issue, but I think a lot of taxpayers would be looking at that stadium money first to fund their property tax rebate that was promised to them 30 years ago when we passed this.
Yep, 1996, that stadium sales tax campaign promised 30% of revenue would go to property tax relief. The current figure is 4.5%. I mean, Reese, she has a point. She said, do I get to pretend to be Mike Brown up in here saying I'm for the kids? The stadiums are a luxury. The children are a necessity. Necessity should come first. But her fellow commissioner, Stephanie Summerall-Dumas, warned that mixed messages about stadium funds could really undermine the levy's chances with voters, given that it's not really a viable option to use the stadium funds to.
Yeah, and I think that's the important part here is that the county has to come up with some way to fund this, but tapping into the stadium taxes probably is not really an option.
So flipping back to downtown, Brewdog, this is another in a series of casualties in the craft brewing scene in Cincinnati. I mean, we've seen stalwarts like Listerman close and Woodburn Brewing going back to East Walnut Hills. Brewdog abruptly closed in 2025. Then it was sued by its landlord for $616,000. Landlord won that default judgment because Brewdog didn't respond to the lawsuit. But it's finally got a new restaurant tenant, and it's one of the largest spaces in our urban core. I mean, it's 8,500 square feet, and that's dwarfed, I think, only by Jeff Ruby's Steakhouse, which is
11,000?
12,000. And then Skyline, strangely, on Fountain Square, which has 9,500 square feet of dining space. So it's a fairly substantial restaurant, and it is being taken over by a fairly new entrant into the scene, Neil Neff. He also owns Los Patrones in Delhi Township. He's going to be opening Coco Moon. That's a Mexican and Asian style restaurant that should be coming online in October.
Yeah, Andy, it's exciting to see someone come back to that space at Brewdog, because I know I had been there a couple of times. Again, now I'm dating myself, but it was probably pre-pandemic that I was there. But it's a great space. It's a really unique building. It's got a cool rooftop, so it's exciting to see someone bringing a new concept there.
And it's an interesting mix of cuisine, Mexican and Asian style. So unlike something like Lalo, which kind of fused Mexican or Latin and Asian influences into dishes like a curried chicken burrito, this is going to serve things like birria tacos, quesadillas, and burritos alongside dishes like pad thai and General Tso's chicken. And there's going to be a VIP area, possibly in the mezzanine, which, housed pinball machines and arcade games when it was back when it was Brewdog, but now could be something a little more exclusive.
So will we see you, Andy, up in the VIP area?
Yeah, they say that your life doesn't end when you have a baby. I think little girl's going to have to get used to the sound of the VIP lounge.
Yeah, put her in the pumpkin seat and bring her along.
All right, this week on the podcast, we have Nick Lingenfelter, Chief Development Officer of PLK Communities. Cincinnati is growing, but not at the pace of some of its peers. Lingenfelter thinks the region needs more alignment. And what he means by that is everyone rowing in the same direction, from government to private developers to higher education to grow Cincinnati. He's got some experience in growth. PLK is the developer behind projects like Norwood's Factory 52 and the upcoming redevelopment of Hyde Park Square. This is Nick Lingenfelter on Above the Fold.
With family-friendly attractions, vibrant neighborhoods, there's something new around every corner. The Cincy is the perfect place to spend a day, a weekend, or longer. Learn more or plan your trip at visitcincy.com.
So how much does something like companies relocating their headquarters here, becoming job centers in an area like Blue Ash, I mean, I have to imagine you guys factor into what you guys do. I mean, so I'm kind of the dumb man on the podcast. Tom covered commercial real estate for over a decade. I covered restaurants and retail, so I don't have the background, but I have to imagine things like that, wins for the region, are also wins for PLK when it comes to looking at where to do projects.
Yeah, I would say that's one of the things that we've been lacking some of the other cities in the state is truly wins for the region like that. I think long term, that's exactly what we need. I'd like to see, multiples of those every year. I think we all would. And I think what's missing there a little bit is how do we get to that level again? How do we get aligned as a region? Because that company's great. I don't know the exact number of employees. I haven't done enough research to know how that would directly affect us. But what I will say is growth of the region as a whole is what we need to focus on. But also then you could tie it directly right back to housing and other assets that we need to work on. And what I mean by that is historically, Cincinnati, the competitive advantage we had was our housing was more affordable. And then the last, 3 to 5 years, we've topped every list of the highest rent growth. But we haven't been topping the list of the highest job growth. So if we're on the top of that list of rent growth, we're lagging in job growth, and we're not growing our supply, that's going to create an issue. And then it's also going to take away that competitive advantage that we all relied upon. Our CFO the other day was showing me some data that effectively the Sun Belt's been beating everybody in the Midwest last couple of years. But we're at the point now where it's more cost effective to locate down there. And if we want to convince people to move here, we have to find ways that housing is more affordable and other options are available to make your company want to relocate.
So isn't that kind of a double-edged sword, though? Because, I mean, with rents growing as, a developer of multifamily properties, it's got to mean that projects look more attractive to you, but then that kind of hurts our competitive advantage as a city, convincing people to relocate here.
Rents are growing, but supply is not necessarily. So that's great if you already own an existing asset. But if it's difficult to build a new project already, or you have a longer period of time, that's just going to make the existing properties win more. So you kind of want a bit of both. We definitely want rent to grow at a reasonable rate. I think we all do, right? I mean, that's just the basic level of inflation, cost of living adjustments that everybody's kind of used to. But we need to see both. We need to see both of those occur.
In my experience on the single family home side, Cincinnati was a steady Eddie forever. It was 3% growth year after year. You could set your watch by it. And then you had the Great Recession, values kind of tanked for a bit, and then we shot up, and it has not stopped doing that. Is it kind of the same on the commercial, I should say on the apartment side?
I'd say a little bit. Yeah, we were definitely very steady on the rental growth. You could always peg it to a couple percent a year. And then we definitely saw the larger swings. And then also what you have to think about is, so COVID hits, more people graduating school stayed at home, or we saw that kind of phase. And then after that came out, a lot more people wanted to live on their own. So you saw more one bedrooms come in demand than say a 2-bedroom. Well, then as rents started to grow, all of a sudden now, okay, well, I'll have a roommate again. Kind of get over the COVID. Like I don't necessarily want to, I'll say germs or something else, but it was just more of like, I want to have my own space to now like, hey, the only way to make it work is to put a 2-bedroom unit is 2 college graduates or whatever it is, friends living together, like many of us probably did.
Yeah.
So I think it's a mix of both. But there's definitely a major gap between the costs of owning a home and the cost of renting still. And that's definitely a metric that we look at.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, I'm most familiar with Factory 52 because
Mhm.
I lived in Norwood, 1.2 miles away from that. So my wife and I, we'd walk there, and the Gather All was a fantastic amenity for us. And having 2 breweries bookend that was really cool. But prior to you guys building that, after the playing card factory shut down, it was not maybe the most visually appealing space. What about that appealed to PLK as a developer, and kind of walk me through how you guys approach looking at sites for projects like Factory 52?
So I'd take Factory 52 out and say it's such an anomaly from what we typically do. The majority of our business is, suburban apartments, 2-story walk-ups, things like that. Most people don't even really realize that that's, a Factory 52 or some of our other projects in the middle of town might only be like 10% of what we do on a daily basis from development, because we're building a lot more workforce housing. I call it not very nice workforce housing, but it is truly suburban housing that meets a need that's more cost effective, because the cost of developing an urban environment is just more expensive.
Mhm.
It takes longer, and there's a lot more challenges. So when you say what makes a Factory 52 make sense to us from an investment standpoint, there's a lot of factors that went into it. We looked at the United States playing card facility for close to 3 years before we bought it.
Oh, wow.
A lot of people didn't really realize that. I know they looked at it for the soccer stadium at one point. There was like a lot of other developers that did, but you had almost 1 million square feet of buildings that were there. And a lot of them that were functionally obsolete. As much as we wanted to save them, there were a lot of challenges with trying to figure out how to do historic dollars or anything else. And we actually got to the point where like, okay, well, how do we make a project viable? Because we just have to solve the problem. At some point, we can try to save everything and do all the right things, but it's not that we don't want to do that, but we also have to move forward. So that's when it came down to, okay, what are the most critical items that we must save, the historical elements that we must keep, and then everything else, we have to figure out how to move the project forward. So what attracted us to that site that was really, we were talking at the time, 20 plus acres in the middle of the city, which is not easy to come across.
Yeah.
We're now north of 30 acres with the factory next door. And then he also had a lot of our initial new construction were some townhomes in Oakley. And at the time, the townhome prices, to what Tom was commenting about, started going up, creeping up very quickly. And we're saying, okay, well, where's next? Because you had Hyde Park and Oakley stretching out further. And then Norwood kind of was that next area where actually the edge of our property is the city of Cincinnati. So we actually acquired a sliver right along the highway. So up until it was the 70s when the I-71 went in, that was all one flat piece of ground, right? It was just one interconnected neighborhood. And then the highway split it, much like we've seen in other areas around the city. So for us, we had the bridges, we had the connectors, but what we saw the opportunity to do is, in order to make this truly mixed use, we had to think differently. We couldn't put on the traditional hat of, who's the national retailer that's going to come in here, or a restaurant, because they're not. The first thing they say is, well, what's my highway access? They have the models that they look at. So we had to approach it from a different direction. That's where the food hall kind of came into play. You look at Norwood and a lot of the business sector up there in Montgomery is a great opportunity to continue growth, continue like resurgence in that area, where it's more economical space to open because it's older buildings that maybe they don't cost the same level of new construction. And as a tenant, you can afford to rent them cheaper. And so what we had to say is, how do we continue this growth this direction? And some of that was, well, we can't necessarily afford to build a restaurant space for a 2,500 to 3,500 square foot restaurant. You could be a few $1,000,000, and we're talking about an industry where you have a high failure rate that's just known. So that's millions of dollars that you can't afford to risk. So how do you do it? The food hall was a natural progression into, okay, well, somebody can open a 300 to 500 square foot stall inside a food hall. we can limit what the risk is. It was still a very significant capital risk. But then once we know that they can successfully operate a restaurant business, now it's easier for the building down the street to be re-tenanted because the landlord can then say, okay, I've seen them. I can see they can be successful. It's almost like a test case, right? And we're not then taking millions of dollars in risk on a flyer. So we can't, what's been able to achieve downtown's amazing, but at the same time, private industries, like private companies, can't afford to do that. So we have to think about it a little bit differently. So we had to kind of make that fit for our model. And that's where factory kind of came into play. We wanted to create that retail mix, and we're now starting to get, let's say there's 3 or 4 new retail tenants that we're hopefully announcing soon, things like that. So that's all starting to grow, but it does take time to build up and grow and really change that. So the breweries were, again, having to get creative. There wasn't enough liquor licenses, so we had to create an entertainment district. You needed 20 acres. So we had to create all these just different things in order to solve the problem. And to the outside person, you may not have known what was going on, but we're solving a lot of puzzles all day and saying, like, how do we move this forward? Well, that fully answered the question, but
Yeah, I don't know if I would have intuited that, it sounds like some creative problem solving, because liquor licenses, especially the way that I didn't know this until I started this job, they're so limited by geography, and unless you're in a D5J district, which, for the uninitiated is that entertainment district where it's not so population limited, it can be really hard and expensive to come by. So it's a pretty unique way to attack that problem.
yeah, and breweries were exempt. So what we had to have was, in order to create an entertainment district, we needed 3 licenses within a short radius. There was one that was an existing business nearby. And so we had to figure out, how do we get to 3? We'd have to track them. There's all these other processes that just were not easy to do. But by attracting breweries, they could actually go direct to the state. There wasn't a limit on how many breweries could be created.
Mhm.
So all of a sudden, then we met with 2 breweries and the nearby establishment. We had 3 licenses within the radius, which then allowed us to create the entertainment district, which then opened up a whole new bucket of licenses to allow us to attract other places there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to nerd out too much about this, but I remember back when OTR first got its entertainment district
Mhm.
uh, designation, and that really kind of changed. Over the Rhine of today would not exist were it not for that, with all the bars, the restaurants. So it can be pretty game changing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So how does one get into this line of work? Were you, as a 4-year-old, looking at architectural plans and thinking, yes, I want to be a real estate developer?
I don't think anybody initially sets out to do it unless you grow up in the industry, which I didn't. For me, it was about creating spaces that people wanted to be at. Kind of an alignment of, I started in banking, so I knew how to put the deals together. My dad did historic building restoration work, so I understood that as well. And it was really just figuring out how we could take spaces and make them more, a better benefit to the society. So when we look at a site, how can we put our spin on it? How can we work within the framework that we have as a company and really come up with a solution that benefits as many people as we can? Will we get everybody happy? No, but I really do. I love solving puzzles. So it really is like, looking at zoning code, looking at all these things and saying, how do we find a way to take this complex problem and create a solution that makes it work? And work 100% no, but work to move forward, yes, because that is what growth in city building is. It's thinking of a space and continually evolving. I mean, even today, we'll be in the middle of a project and you're constantly changing, adapting to what changes in the market have. I mean, you could have been in the middle of COVID building a building, all of a sudden could have been functionally obsolete by the time COVID was over. Well, if you're not good at adapting and you're not good at problem solving, we can't move forward. So I think what I like about it is nothing is constant. It's constantly changing. And in the end, you get to work with a tangible product. I wasn't the type that wanted to work in an office building all day. I wanted to go see my work outside.
Mhm.
So I'm not an architect. I'm not the best artist. I'm good enough at math to make it all kind of come together. So it's really kind of, I call it more problem solving and developing solutions.
And how long have you been at PLK now?
I want to say 8 or 9 years in that
Yeah.
range.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
What's, How has the company changed since you got there to today? How would you describe kind of the trajectory that PLK's been on?
So prior to me joining, Peter had really done an amazing job building this company as a local company from the ground up. So historically, when I got there, they focused on what I called acquisition and improvements. That's my language from like the banking industry, right? So you buy an older property, you fix it up, and you really focus on taking something that maybe was distressed or needed some love and bring it back to a valuable asset for the neighborhood. So that's what the company was founded on. How do we take something underutilized and really kind of bring it back and make it an asset to the community and then hold it for the long term? Because we're long term holders. We describe ourselves as owner operators and developers. And honestly, we also own a construction company too. So we also build our own product.
Because a lot of times developers will build the product, then sell it off to
Mhm.
investors.
That's called a merchant builder. So that term is, they truly are a merchant. They come in, they zone it, they build it, and they move on, which is what you see in a lot of larger cities that are growing quickly. It's actually, in my opinion, a sign of a healthy ecosystem for development and real estate when we see a lot more companies wanting to come into town and build. But on the counter to that is a competitive advantage to us sometimes where it's like, hey, if you're the only one that, if you know the local playing field, it's definitely a good thing to have that advantage. But it's also, again, a sign as a merchant builders are in town that they can make money. I think that's where a lot of what you see Ohio has incentives that people talk about all the time. And the reason why is it's really not conducive for merchant builders yet. And until that uh, ability to take something that you build that has a profit on paper the day you're complete is there, a merchant builder can't come into town.
Hmm.
It's the only way they make money. So if you truly could build something and make your 12, 14, 15%, whatever your target is, right? If you could build it today and have that at the end, you would see merchant builders, but
So
it's not there. So we don't see them.
yeah, what needs to happen in Ohio to get to that point, or is there something the city of Cincinnati could be doing?
I think this is something that I've really thought about for a while now. Like I'm not from here, so I think that's different as well. But when you look at other growing cities and regions, say like a Columbus, um, they focus truly on job growth and winning as a region. It feels like we have amazing organizations, universities, just so many incredible companies here as a whole, but we're not always rowing in the same direction. I say we're not aligned, right? And that comes down to, in my mind, the difference between like an incentive and an alignment of an area. So I say an incentive is what helps you make a decision, right? So project incentive, whatever, you go to the store, you maybe weren't going to buy that shirt, but now it's 10, 20% off. Are you going to buy it? Well, yeah, I'll buy it now. Like that's an incentive, right? So how do I choose to spend my money? How does a business choose to invest their money? If it's naturally aligned and conducive, they're going to do it anyway.
Mm.
If it's not, they need the incentive to bridge that gap. So if on paper we build something today and it's worth pretty much what we build it for or less when we're done because the cost of materials are higher, then you need that incentive or it doesn't work. That's not me. That's just any company as a whole needs to make revenue. So you back to our company real quick. We have 250 employees now. That's between operations, which is a major piece of our business. And then you have construction, development, and all the other pieces that go together. So in order for a company like ours to continue to grow and continue to provide benefits to the region, to our employees, to their families, to their kids, all those things, right? We have to continue to make money. Or if we don't, we can't grow. So then you say, well, what does alignment mean? Because this is one that I've tried to figure out. So when I was first in banking, I watched the New Albany company grow, which is in New Albany, Ohio. I'm not sure if you've seen this before, but when the Limited really wanted to grow that area, what they did was they went out and said, who are our top suppliers? And they offered them preferred contracts. So instead of say a 2-year contract, all of a sudden you got a 7, right? If you moved your headquarters there. So what I would ask is, and maybe this is just a different way to think about it, like what if all of these incredible institutions in town said, hey, we want to grow our region, right? So not just find a way to operate our business somewhere else, but what if we said, hey, our tell our major suppliers that we'll give you a longer term contract or a better deal, or we're going to work with the university to make sure that you have the right workforce or something else. What if we really thought of it that way as a way to give back to our community? So, some companies give dollars to help fix problems. What if their way of giving dollars was actually growing the region and bringing in new businesses? Like we talked about in Blue Ash, right? $100 million movement. That's awesome. What if we had 10 of those a year, right? But what if we did it with our companies doing that instead of just trying to win them with an incentive? So that's where the difference between the incentive and the alignment comes in. So all of a sudden, if 10 companies are moving here a year and other businesses are hearing that 10 companies are moving here a year, they're going to want to be here too, right? Because we all want to be around activity, around something exciting.
It's the Nashville idea, right? So Nashville is booming because it's booming.
Exactly. When the young people are coming there because it's booming and because there's opportunity. And so if you live here, I love having my family here. My wife's family's here. It's great for that. But what it isn't is, like, we also want our kids to come back or be here. Well, where are they going? They're going to the growing city. So if we want to fix that problem, we make ourselves the growing city, right? But that means we need abundant housing. That means we need spaces to move to. We need to be thinking about taking sites like a Factory 52 or St. Bernard Soap or whatever all these things are going to be around town, like the bigger sites, and saying, how does that continue to move our region forward? And we have great organizations doing it right now. I mean, you have Ready, you have the Port, you have all these, but it truly just needs to be thought about as a mindset for the whole region, not just one or two organizations trying to fix it.
And, the abundancy of housing that would necessitate in a city like Cincinnati that, has its existing physical infrastructure
Mhm.
density. And I know you mentioned a lot of your projects are more suburban, but how does that approach change when it is more urban, like with Factory 52, or I know this could be a third rail topic, but like with Hyde Park, how do you approach development there?
You have to assume that it just takes longer and it's going to cost you significantly more. So when you look at, let's take a suburban project, right? So what we say, if rent is in this neighborhood is $1,000 and this neighborhood's $2,000, at the end of the day, the cost of the sticks are the same. The lumber is the same, the brick's the same. Within reason, the materials, say 10% or so, depending on if you have a different exterior. So then the other costs come down to land and what we call soft costs. So how long does it take to develop? How long does it take to, get through city permitting? How long does it take to, just all the various aspects? Do I have to pay for architecture fees up front? Is there a greater risk? All those things come into play. And that's what slows down more of the urban development. So it's not that the materials physically cost more, unless you're building, say, a mid-rise that requires steel or something else of that nature. It really comes down to, timing and soft costs, which can be 30 to 40% of your budget. But all of a sudden, if those are double, because in the suburbs, I can go buy a piece of land, I can zone it and be under construction. We have multiple projects 9 months after the day we sign the contract we're building. Go in the city, it could be 3 years. So if you're 2 to 3 years, which nobody likes, right? So how does that do it? And then you might have a longer urban build cycle because you have a tighter construction site. You're working in just, within a block, and how do you stage? And all of a sudden that suburban project that could be built in 12 to 18 months might take 2.5, 3 years. Again, so you have a longer cycle up front and a longer cycle on the back side. So all of a sudden I've got this urban project that could be 5 or 6 years to truly cash flow. We're in the suburbs, from the day I close to the day I deliver, is 18 to 24 months. So as an investor or a company, that's why you see the merchant builders and everybody build in the suburbs, not in the urban environment, just because it takes so much longer. And it's not that we don't want to be here. We do. It just makes it's much more conducive to business in those environments right now.
No. So then why take on those projects? Hyde Park Square, it's courting some controversy and opposition, but it is also a crown jewel business district of Cincinnati. So why take on a project like that? I mean, what does something like that mean to PLK?
Start with what you finished with, right? So it is a crown jewel to our city, right? It means a lot to everybody. And I want to say that I think we're all aligned that it needs to move forward. We look at a business district that's been around for over 100 years, that a lot of the spaces within it are close to 100 years old, if not a little bit older. One of the buildings we have there had a bar that was going in before we acquired it that had went into bankruptcy. That bar was getting built without water or utilities in the bar because the building was so old. It's in the back. So that in itself is a significant challenge, right? But understanding that, you also can see some of the opportunity there, the opportunity to really kind of take and reinvest in our hometown. That's the other reason why I don't think anybody from out of town would have taken the project on, just because they can't afford, their job is to find a site, build it, and move on, right? That's the merchant mentality. So as a local business and truly wanting to invest in our city, this made sense. It made sense to help put our city back on that stage. When we say that we want our region to win, everybody hears of Hyde Park Square, so they want to go see it. But then they go to Hyde Park Square, like, I see what it can be, but like, is this like real estate offices and everything else, or is that really what Hyde Park Square should be? If that's going to be the signature square, Hyde best used,
Yeah.
If that's really what, like, if we want to think of our region, say, how do we grow and how do we bring these people in and how do we think of our city at the next level, that has to be at the next level too. And I think that's truly what it gets down to, is we know we need housing, we know we need opportunity, and we know we need places for families to live. If you look at the Hyde Park neighborhood, it's over half of the houses are occupied by single person households. But when people moved into the neighborhood, it was younger families at the time, right? So now, if there's not a place for, like the next group of families to come in, if there's not a place to grow that neighborhood, that's what's going to happen. It's going to stay stagnant. And it has so many amazing characteristics, but it also could be so much better too. So how do you do both? How do you achieve both goals and continue to make this the signature square, but at the same time, make that the signature square that people come and say, man, I want to live in that neighborhood if I move my business here, because that's where we want those business owners to live. If you want them living in the city. So we got to make the neighborhood match what we're trying to achieve as a goal.
Well, as we wrap up here, I've got a couple of rapid fire questions for you. What is your favorite part about living in Cincinnati? I know you said you're from out of town originally.
Yeah, so I'd say a couple different things. I love the character in our city. I think that's a common thing you hear in new cities. It all kind of looks the same. I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think that's just current architecture and design standards. But there's so many neighborhoods, and I would say Cincinnati has soul. So, like, what is the character and soul of each neighborhood? Like, you can go to an Oakley, you can go to Blue Ash, you can go to these other areas, or Hyde Park, or even over the Rhine, and you know just how much coolness and character there is. Or go to look at what's happening down in Covington, right? There's just so much amazing activity going on. So I'd say kind of the arts culture is really my favorite part of the city. I've always been into the arts. So for me, it's just like seeing, Blink and all these amazing things that we are investing into, because that resonates on an international level. And that's where I see our city going. So I think that's probably my favorite part of it.
What's the first place you take someone from out of town when they're visiting Cincinnati for the first time?
I'd probably, obviously want to see Over the Rhine, but I would say I'd probably see Over the Rhine or parts of like any of the old buildings around here, whether it's Camp Washington or my favorite building in town is Museum Center right up there, right? So you want to see just incredible Art Deco architecture. It's just so amazing to see that building. Dixie Terminal across the street where the old trains used to go out. You can walk through there and just, it's unbelievable to see the inside of that. So I think those two are two of the places that if you're from out of town, I'd show you those right away. And honestly, Findlay Market, I think that's what you want people to see.
And then favorite place to get a quick lunch and favorite restaurant to go for a celebration.
So I would say that favorite lunch, let's go celebration, would be probably Soto. And quick lunch, I eat the Gather a lot, honestly, because I love all the different restaurants there. Steaminese is probably my fastest. It's next door, but I don't get lunch a lot. But I would say, Sotos are definitely our celebration spot. And most days I'm just something quick in the car between meetings.
Well, Nick, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Above the Fold is a podcast by the Cincinnati Business Courier, presented by Cincinnati Regional Tourism. The podcast is produced by Neil Slimick and hosted by me, Andy Brownfield, and Tom Nemeropoulos. Our theme music was written and performed by Dylan McCartney. Come back next week for another episode of Above the Fold.